How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Really glad you're here. Please excuse the mess in the garage today. I got a lot of other projects going on, but today we're going to be putting this engine into the Dakota. Now, I don't know how many days this is going to take. I don't know if it's going to be a week-long process, if I can do it in a couple hours, but we're going to try and get this engine into the Dakota relatively simple. Now, I've never done this before. Full disclaimer, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to go about it. I'm just going to kind of learn as I go and hopefully have something pretty cool in the end. So this engine is pretty much ready to go. If you've been following along with this project, I'm sorry for the delays, but life gets in the way and you know how it goes. But I'm a little bit behind schedule, but the engine is pretty much ready to go. Now there's a couple things like a EGT probe on the exhaust manifold, maybe a couple sensors or something might be in the way, but for the most part, it's all ready to go into the truck. I'm not gonna explain that to you guys right now. I'm not gonna bore you. We're just gonna get right to the action of throwing this thing into the Dakota. Got the hood off already, got my welder all ready to go, so this is going to be a pretty fun video for me. I'm really excited. It's something I've wanted to do since I started this project. So I'm going to put you guys on the tripod. Hope you enjoy the video. Now, before we start, it's also worth mentioning that I deleted the vacuum pump off the ALH. I just bought a Whitbread Performance vacuum plate delete kit. Same guy that makes the adapter plate for this NSG 370. Works really well. I just had to delete it for fitment issues. It's going to be too thick, too wide, and so when this engine is against the firewall, it's either going to impede with the clearance of the firewall or it's going to be impossible to access when the engine's in there. So right now that's fine, that's not a big deal, but you solve one issue and you create two others. Now that the vacuum pump has been deleted, I have to find a place to put a vacuum pump for the engine. It needs a vacuum pump for all sorts of things, for sensors, the N75 valve, the wastegate for the turbo. There's a bunch of stuff. So I have a couple options. I can either, because I deleted the AC compressor down below, I can make something up here off to the side for a belt-driven vacuum pump, or I could do a electronic vacuum pump. I haven't really decided what to do yet, but that's going to be something, as well as an AC compressor, probably on this side of the engine, just because that's where the AC lines are on the Dakota. So not exactly sure how I'm going to go about it, but that is something I'm going to have to solve in the future. But that's a problem for future Cody. So for now, let's see if this thing will fit. So the problem I'm running into is these motor mounts are just so big. They're big and clunky, and they're kind of impeding the bell housing from slipping through. You can see what I'm hanging up on. All this stuff right here, I don't even think I need it. It's just the factory mount for that 4.7 liter Magnum. Come on. There we go. Nice. So I got it past those mounts. This one was a lot easier than the other side. The transmission is kind of getting hung up a little bit. It's not too bad. Well, here's what an ALH looks like in a Dodge Dakota. So a couple problems here. I've just been sitting here in the shade looking at this thing, seeing what I need to clearance and fit and move and everything. So I can't move the engine any farther back because this bracket for the AC compressor is actually hitting on the driver's side engine mount right here. So I can either get rid of this, just cut it, because I know I'm not going to be putting an AC compressor back here in the future, or maybe make a big cut here. This is made out of aluminum and I really don't want to cut this if I don't have to. As big as it is, I'd rather just keep it. Another issue is the engine mount. This engine mount here is a little bit back behind the driver's side engine mount, so I'm gonna have to make like a I was really hoping to be in line kind of over here, and I could just easily lay my plate on top of this, but I'm gonna have to like come out and over to it, which isn't the end of the world, but it was a little bit different than I thought it would be. On this side, there's really nothing to it. This isn't really in the way much, and when I clearance this over here on this side, I'll have more room to go driver's side, and I'll have more room for this mount here. It's pretty much just a straight shot right over to this mount, so really happy with that. Just thinking out loud here, I'm gonna have to clock this turbo. I think I want to clock it over to where the outlet is right here, so I can go to the intercooler, which is about where I'm sitting right now. Then probably up for a pipe up to the intake here. Everything else, the bottom side, sorry for the shadows here guys, but the bottom side looks good. It's got tons of clearance all around the oil pan. It's not going to interfere with any of these steering lines or anything. I'm really happy with that there. I think I'm going to have enough height. I don't think it'll be an issue clearancing the hood. So this is where it gets kind of weird. I've never seen this before on a vehicle, but the engine mounts there are integral to the engine, and they keep the axle. They're the same mounts for the axle as well as the transmission. I've never seen that before on an engine before. It is kind of strange, but it mounts on the driver's side mount, the passenger side mount, and this third mount here. It's a little bracket coming off the differential, and it'll actually bolt to the bell housing. So I'm gonna have to get a jack this up to the proper angle, because I can't have too steep of an angle or too, you know, either way it has to be just right, and then run a bolt through here, through one of these holes, whatever is easier to line up. So not the end of the world, it's just a little interesting how that's gonna have to take place. I think for most guys doing a TDI swap, they wouldn't have to deal with it, but just because it's a Dodge Dakota, it's kind of par for the course. Now the slave cylinder here that I have zip tied out of the way, that'll actually bolt right up to the NSG 370. So the clutch is already figured out. That's no big deal at all. Back here, the engine mount is almost on the cross member. You can see how I have just 2 of the 4 bolts in this little channel here for the cross member, and I can't go any further back because of that bracket interfering with the engine mount. So I'm kind of maxed out as I am right here. I also noticed some clearance issues. I noticed that when it came time to shoehorn this transmission in here, this little lip of the transmission dome here is kind of in the way. Not that much, but I figured if I took a hammer and just rolled this over, it would probably be a little bit easier to clearance getting this engine in and out, in and out, in and out. My whole goal with this is getting this in the stock place, just as it would be as a stock Dakota. That way that when the transfer case is bolted onto here, the drive shaft length's the same length. I won't have to get any custom drive shafts or anything like that. I want to keep it as stock as possible, because then even the shifter coming up through the hole here is going to be in the stock location, and there's not going to be any funky angles or any welding, fabricating to kind of get the shifter through the cab there. So fast forward a little bit, I took out the alternator and also this pulley, this idler pulley. Now I wanted to see just how much this bracket was interfering with the engine mount and vice versa. So because this engine still has to go back a little bit, it's impeding this from going back to mounting the transmission all the way that I would like. I know that I have to notch this out a little bit. All right, so I'm just taking a brush and cleaning everything up here, getting all this stuff prepped for when I put it back on the truck. So what I'm doing now, I've figured out what I need to cut away on the engine mounts on the passenger side. For now, I'm going to leave the driver's side alone, but for here, I'm going to cut alongside these 2 bolts and kind of follow this line all the way down to here. So second time around, because I notched this out, it's a lot easier to get this bell housing around these mounts. Way easier. So for the first time ever, the transmission mount is in its proper position. All 4 bolts are in those channels, and then you can see just how much clearance I have with that mount. I might even have to take some out of this as well, but when it comes to this side, I'm still pretty close. So I'm glad I took that out, but it's still a tight fit. All right, so I had to take the engine out again. The bracket that I had cut out next to the alternator still was interfering with this mount that came kind of out and then down. So I just cut a big 3 1/4 by 2 1/4 inch section out, and I think I have enough clearance, as well as kind of took out more material on this mount as well. So not only is that gonna clear, but it should be easier to get the engine and transmission in as well. But also, now that alternator bracket isn't interfering with this mount, I think I have enough metal cut away. The transmission should sit flat along the cross member, and it's gonna line up with the shifter in the hole in the floor. So that all should work now. I just spiffied up the frame rails here. There's a lot of rust here on the frame rails, so I just kind of spray painted that a little bit. It's not, you know, a professional job, but it looks better. Kind of all back in here, got a lot of the dirt off the frame. Underneath a lot of that dirt was really nice black painted frame rails, and, you know, not a whole lot of rust in this area. What I also did was took a hammer and beat that seam over, and so now the transmission's going to be easier to get in that tunnel as well. So just making things a lot easier, as well as painting that transmission cross member too. Just doing all that I can to make it look better once the engine's in here, because if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. All right, so I think I finally removed enough metal out of these mounts. It's taken me days to figure out how much to remove. I'd adjust something and find out that it's not enough metal removed, or I pretend as if I was trying to replace the alternator and more metal of this engine mount was getting in the way. So I just had to cut all the way down to here. It's probably a good 3-4 inches, but got it removed. So now I can get the alternator out. As long as I remove the power steering pulley, the idler pulley, and the tensioner, the alternator can come out forwards. So good news is the engine mount coming out and over to here isn't going to interfere with that replacement if I need to do that in the future. On this side, still there's nothing in the way. It's really okay. So I put a block underneath the engine here on this rack and pinion and just let it rest. Put no tension on the chains, and I could just rock it left and right. And the transmission mount on the back is sitting where it's supposed to be. And the bracket there, those 2 holes you can see, are just about ready to line up with that bolt hole in the bell housing. So I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to put a jack underneath the differential and have an angle finder that's magnetic. I'm going to put that on the flange for the where the drive shaft goes, and I'm going to get that up to a 90-degree angle so it's flush with the bell housing, so I can run a bolt through it. So the engine is back out of the vehicle, and I'm getting really close, just figuring out what needs to be fitted, what needs to be ground down, what needs to be cut. I'm getting really close, but I decided to take the engine out so I could take off the exhaust manifold, and I'm going to put in an EGT gauge probe while the engine's out. Seems to be a lot easier than when the engine's all mounted up and everything's in my way. So got the turbo on the table. I wanted to drill right in the center here. That's what I preferred to do, but the angle that this probe sits is just too close to the intake. So if I come off a little bit over here, it's going to be easier to get to. It's not in line with the intake or exhaust manifold bolt, so if I need to take off the intake, for example, this probe isn't going to be in the way to get to that bolt. So the instructions for this glow shift EGT gauge called for a type R drill bit. I'd never even heard of it. I guess it's a 0.339 inches in diameter. All right, so a little fast forward here. Got the EGT probe all done. Exhaust manifold is back in the engine, and the engine is obviously back in the truck. So this whole mounting system of having to reuse these factory Dodge Dakota mounts, it's kind of a catch-22, to where you have to get this engine clocked just right so the bell housing hole will line up with that mount. The other hand, it's kind of nice because you can only go so far forward with it, and then you have a 3-point contact system kind of to get it centered in where you want the engine to be. It kind of helps you out in a way. So the 2 bolts on the transmission mount are bolted down, so that helps get it flat. And then the mount here on the differential, I can only go so far forward before I have to run into that adapter plate. So that right there helped a lot. So the transmission mount is sitting flat, and the hole is, the shifter is lined up perfectly with the hole in the floor. And then this is caulked just right. It's a little loose. The only thing left now was the engine mounts. And what I've been doing off camera is trying to figure out how I can make a mount that goes around the alternator, which sits here, and still get access to these bolts, get access to these hoses, whatever I need to do. So I've done a lot of this off camera, but I finally have it mocked up to where I want it. So for example, on the passenger side, it's a really small mount. That little piece here is about 1 inch wide, but it mounts there on the passenger side mount, and I still have enough clearance for this bolt to come out if I need to. So I'm going to put a gusset below it and on top, and I think that'll be enough. Same with the driver's side here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a long flat bar piece of metal down here and here, almost like an I-beam or a T configuration, to give it way more strength, because having this 90-degree angle isn't really ideal, but I'm working with what I got. So one of the issues I have is the extension cord isn't long enough on my MIG welder. So instead of waiting a week for an extension cord to get shipped to my house, I'm just going to use my flux core here and just tack weld those mounts in place, take them off the engine and bring them inside the garage, and I can properly burn them in with this heavier duty equipment. So here's what that driver mount looks like. There's going to be plenty of room to put some gussets in here. This is a 3-inch flat bar, again 1/4-inch plate steel, and I just made some of these small gussets, almost kind of like an I-beam setup. So it's going to give it an incredible amount of rigidity, one for the bottom as well, and then one for this side. For the passenger side plate, it's just a small gusset here, and then again one on underneath. But again, I think that should be plenty of strength. It being all 1/4-inch plate, it should be more than enough. All right, so I got the MIG machine all set up, and I've been laying down some beads here, just practicing bit by bit, getting closer and closer to dialing these settings in for the 1/4-inch plate, and I think I got it. So what I'm going to do is get started on this driver's side mount here, and start with the first gusset and kind of just build my way back. So all I did was just tack these things in place and kind of see what I'm going after. On the passenger side here, I just put in some gussets that came with the kit. You can kind of see top and bottom. I put that one at an angle so it would have full coverage across the entire strip of that flat bar. Messed up the weld there in that little corner, but that's okay, I'll go over it again. But this is almost done. So here's the driver's side mount all bolted up here. Still have to file away some of these rough edges, but it's almost ready for paint. This one is ready for paint. Got the flap disc on it and just smoothed out all those rough edges. And going with a similar color to like the truck frame itself, so it'll blend real nice when you're looking at the engine bay. But these really did turn out well. I'm really impressed with it. And even though it's still being supported by the chain, I mean, this thing is rock solid. That's not going anywhere. So I'm really happy with it. Okay, so a moment of truth here. We'll see if my welds hold up. Got these both installed onto the block and got the differential bracket tightened down, the transmission mount tightened down. So it's just resting on this block here. So I'm gonna pump up this jack. Get that out of the way. All right, so that's loose. It's officially in the air under its own weight. Looks like just enough clearance for the differential. And because this is an independent, that's not going to move any, so that's plenty of clearance. So it's official. The engine's installed. It took me long enough, but I'm really happy with how these mounts turned out. We'll see if this is strong enough to hold up to the torque of the engine. I mean, right now it's not going anywhere, and I think that third bracket in the back for the differential is going to really help with the rigidity of this thing. So the way it's oriented, I clocked it to where it would be as vertical as possible. It still looks a little off, you know, with the oil cap being offset like that, but I had to have it as vertical as possible and still have it line up with the bolt hole of the bell housing for that bracket. So this is just the best I could configure it in this orientation. But the best news is that the shifter coming through the hole is lined up perfectly. It's not off to one side, and it's back far enough to where I think even just as it is in its factory location, I think the shifter is going to be just fine coming through the hole. If I have to bend it, that's fine. I might have to get rid of this CB radio that was installed in the truck. That's no big deal. That's going to be in the way regardless, I think. But the shifter isn't going to have to be messed with a whole lot, which I'm really happy with. That's what I intended it to be. I didn't want this to be off to one side, so I'd have to drill out the floorboard or do some sort of funky modification. I just wanted it to be as stock as possible. Well guys, I think now is a good stopping point. I'm so happy that the engine's in there. I've envisioned that in my head for over a year, to see that TDI into a Dodge Dakota. And the fact that it's installed and hanging under its own weight, I am so happy with it. I could not be happier. Now we'll see if those brackets hold up to the torque of the engine. If I need to, I can add a gusset in the future. It's not a big deal. But because I have that third bracket on the bolted to the bell housing and the differential, it's so rigid. It's kind of a 3-point mounting system. It's so rigid, I don't think it's going to give me any trouble, especially with the stock power levels. But we'll see. Side note, this welder, guys, is well exceeding my expectations. It's just a completely different power level in that flux core. I've never really been able to weld on 1/4-inch plate steel, and to see this thing weld just like it was nothing, it really was worth the investment. So going forward on this project, I want to kind of give you an update. One, I apologize that it took so long to get this video out. This first part of the build was actually the hardest part. Going forward, now it's just assembling things. So the way I want to structure it is, for example, one video is going to be the exhaust. The next video is going to be maybe the cooling system, intercooler piping, power steering, drive shafts, transfer case. And we'll just take little bitty chunks, each one being a video, and we'll just keep on doing things, checking things off that checklist. Eventually I'm going to run out of parts and the project's going to be finished, but it's really, the hardest part is done. I've never fabricated before. I've never welded with a MIG welder before, so all that was kind of a learning curve. It took me a while to kind of figure out how am I going to build things, how am I going to do it, and then sometimes life just gets in the way and I have other things going on. So thank you again for your patience for this video to get out. 3 months was way too long, way longer than it should have been, but now I'm back in the swing of things and the hardest part is done. Like I said, things are going to go a lot faster. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Really do hope you stick around on this build, because I don't know what we're going to do next. I don't know what makes the most sense to tackle next, but whatever it is, it's going to be a big step in the right direction. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Hope you see the next one. Take care.